Hi, Successfuls. It's Jolene. Are you playing the long game or an infinite game, rather? Listen and find out as Kelly and I dive into the profound approach of Simon Sinek's Infinite Game.
This is the Success Through Community podcast. Okay, so I'm not even going to pretend to banter before we get into this book because I have literally so much to say about this book. And if you follow us on Instagram, then you might have seen when I posted a story about this book, The Infinite Game. I was using old school, pretty tabbies, which turned out to be really horrible, but you'll see in the image, I have tabbed and highlighted the crap out of this book. It's okay. Did I say the name of the book yet? I don't think I did.
No. What are we reading today?
Sorry. I'm so obsessed with it that I forgot that I didn't even say it. The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. And let me just say, I have really been a fan of his for a long, long time, but it's kind of like Brene Brown, how it was in episode 1. I listened to his TED Talks. I've always really appreciated his perspective, but I've never sat down and read one of his books before.
Me either.
Yeah,
I have them.
Let me tell you, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna find more of his books, and they're gonna keep coming up in future episodes because there was just so much good. It's it was one of those kismet moments because a lot of these books I do digital copy or an audiobook or something. And there's only a handful that I actually buy the physical book. Atomic Habits was like that. And it turned out that it was life-changing for me. And this one was like that too. For some reason, I decided to buy the hard copy. And thank God I did, because holy cow, so many things that I wanted to highlight and write. And I don't normally even if I'm highlighting in the book, I don't normally write in the book. I just kept writing stuff. So good. So
I'm that person.
Yeah, well, I'm becoming that person a little bit. I think because of the podcast, because I don't want to have a separate notebook, because don't get me wrong, I love my notebooks, but then I can't find it when I need it later. And if I write the notes right here next to where, what sparked the thought, then it's super easy to find when we're doing the podcast. So I'm becoming that person. But honestly, I think most authors of these kinds of books would be happy to know that I'm defacing their book, because it means that I'm getting so much out of it.
Absolutely. I've always been, in the beginning of my life, when I started my love of books, it was always to try and keep them pristine and beautiful. And then I realized, books are meant to be read. Books are meant to be loved. They're meant to be thrown in your bag and picked up whenever you can, not left on a shelf to be admired from afar.
Right. It's not a first edition. I mean, come on.
And I learned that when I was young, well, I say young, but mid-20s. Anyone in their mid-20s wouldn't feel young. But that's when I realized that writing in a book, highlighting a book, dog-earing them, all of that stuff, it just proves to me that the author, their message is coming through.
Yes.
Now, with all of Simon Sinek's books, I have 3 of them. They are all on my to-read list. I have yet to actually read them, and they're all digital. So I'm wondering now if the ebook is not going to cut it after our conversation today.
I mean, I have to say, in the case of this one, I don't think so. So, because there are so many directions I could go with this conversation, and I'm going to try not to just bounce around from thing to thing, because honestly, that's what my brain was doing with this. In fact, you can attest to this, because every morning when I would read this book, I would end up Facebook Messenger vomiting all over you. Not even necessarily about the book, but just it was so spark inducing that I would just think of all these things. Well, what if we did this? And all because he was really getting those brain juices flowing. So yeah, I mean, knowing you, I think you're going to need the hard copy.
Okay.
Not every book is like that, but because you can You can highlight sometimes on your, depending on what digital platform you're using to read a book, you can highlight things, but no,
I can. I mean, I'm a Google Play girl, so I have my Google Books and I do
you're kind of like
highlight.
renting them, right? You're not buying them?
No, you can buy on Google Play.
Oh, no, you can, but can you also rent?
I don't think so. I've never tried to rent a book.
Oh, okay.
I use I have the Libby app as well, and the Libby app is the one that you rent and connect to your
because that's like
library.
library, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like
Kindle
Unlimited with Amazon, that is like a library as well. And I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that because I've always used Scribed, which has since rebranded, and we won't talk about that because their new name is stupid in my opinion. But they are like, technically it's also kind of like a rental in a way, but like they're not going to expire it on you. Whereas on Kindle Unlimited, yeah, they have a limited number of licensing like the library does. Yeah. And so you're checking out the book. And
I did not know that.
I didn't either, because the term unlimited implies unlimited, and it's not. It's very much limited. So kind of a misnomer. So anyone who was thinking about doing that, think again.
I think I have a Kindle Fire, which is one of those tiny little Kindle tablets. It's not an ebook. It's more of a book reader or whatever. It's more of a tablet.
Yeah, but it's small like a book reader.
Yeah, so, yeah. And I was never really able to get into it. I don't know why.
Yeah. So no, I'm with you.
My Google Play book my Google Play library is just, it's full. It's gross how many books I have in there, because I also subscribe to, and if you haven't, BookBub.
Heck yeah, of course I'm in BookBub.
So of course, it's just, I'll read that. Yeah,
and then you just download it. Yep. Right. Well, I mean, that's good that if you're keeping them, then you can highlight in there and it's okay. But this one in particular really had me, and I think this is the purpose of what he's trying to do here, really had me like rethinking like fundamental mission things about my business. So as he was talking about it, and that's where I'm actually going to start. Okay. I'm going to start with, well, first off, let me just give like a high level understanding of what the infinite game means. So essentially what he's talking about is that there are two basic mindsets. And full disclosure at the beginning, he is clearly writing this book for corporate America, but it can 100%, it's still a little early. It can 100% apply to entrepreneurs. Well, 100% is probably not totally accurate. 90%. So the concepts totally apply, but there are applications of the concept that he's talking about that will not apply to a solopreneur, because it's talking about how you treat your employees, and you don't have any. That's why you're a solopreneur, right?
Right.
So there are aspects of it that are not going to be super applicable, but the overall concept is totally applicable. And honestly, I think should be required reading before you're allowed to be an entrepreneur, because it's like, it's all about how you're steering the ship.
Okay.
So there are two mindsets that people have, that entrepreneurs, that CEOs, whatever you want to call it, will have. The two approaches to a business. There's the finite game and the infinite game. And the finite game is all about performance, metrics, results, winning and losing, being the best, being the worst, being in the top 1%, whatever. That
feels very corporate to me.
But really, like, step back though and think about the entrepreneur world too. It's there too. It's just more subtle, because I think because a lot of entrepreneurs, especially solopreneurs, are not officially reporting to anybody, I almost think it's more dangerous, easier for us to get caught up in the finite mindset and not even realize it, because we're not like consciously sitting down and writing down. It's like when you think about your KPIs and your metrics, you need to have some results driven KPIs, right? I mean, that's just, if you don't have goals, then how do you do anything, right? How do you know what to do next? But all of your KPIs can't be like winning and losing kind of KPIs for a couple of reasons. One, because you don't control the outcome of a lot of that. And so you need to have some level of outcome controlling KPI, if that makes sense. Something that you can actually really affect. Whereas when it comes to like sales or things like that, you can do all the things to try to influence that KPI, but ultimately it's the customer that's going to determine the result of the KPI.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do one that's more of like a mindset or a culture or something like that kind of KPI, then it's completely internal and controllable as far as success or failure in that regard, right?
Yeah.
So, but the finite is 100% based on like dollars, really. I mean, he doesn't straight up say that, like there are other metrics, but dollars are the bottom line. And this leads to another part of where it's corporate, not entrepreneur, but it's like when you're prioritizing your stakeholders over your customers, over your employees, right? So in the entrepreneur world, likely don't have stakeholders or even investors, most likely. But what that would, I guess, translate to is prioritizing income, really.
Yeah.
Over culture, over people, over relationships, right?
Prioritizing sales. And we see that all the time online, right?
100%.
I made $10,000 this month. Let me show you how. And that seems to be the main focus on a lot of what a lot of online entrepreneurs are really pushing is the finite game, it sounds like.
Right. And look, those things are not evil. They're not bad. They're just not the most important thing, right? And I think, the finite game implies, and this is where it's like, this is where finite versus infinite comes into play, which he, by the way, did not come up with. He did credit somebody else, James P. Carse, as coming up with this concept of finite versus infinite. Okay. But a finite game has an ending, right? There's a winner and a loser. Mm-hmm. In the infinite game, literally the point is that your goal that you're striving for is ultimately unachievable. And I know that feels like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. But track with me and Simon for a second, okay? The point is that we're constantly working to improve, not to win. So ultimately, like if you're creating what he calls your just cause, which is essentially like your mission statement, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. Mm-hmm. That should be a goal, a target that is ongoing, that will never end, that will never actually be reached. And the idea there, and this is where like the corporate kind of aspect comes into play, because it's talking a lot about legacy, right? And like when the original infinite thinker leaves the company, is there a just cause? Is there an understood mission that the rest of the people who are left behind can continue to work towards?
Can it keep moving forward?
Right, can stay in the game.
Right.
Because ultimately in the infinite game, the point is staying in the game, not winning the game. There's no such thing as winning or losing. And he makes such a great point. And I think this is something that entrepreneurs, solopreneurs really need to hear. I know I did when I read it, but like the concept of somebody being the best or being number one or any of that thing, any concept like that, it is completely arbitrary. It is based on metrics that the person who is claiming that arbitrarily came up with. Did everybody else in their industry agree to these terms?
That's true.
No. So this is why you can have two competing organizations. And he gave examples, I don't remember exactly, but let's just say, for example, Pepsi and Coke, right? Because they're obvious rivals.
Right.
They could both say they're the number one soda. Depends what their metrics are.
They do both say that.
I'm sure they do. And that's exactly the point, right? Is that concept of being number one is meaningless.
Wait, so I'm not the world's greatest mom?
Well, that's different.
Are you sure?
Yes, that is totally different. That's what the mug says. Therefore, it is true.
Okay, then.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like you cannot actually say that you are the best or you are first or number one unless the entirety of the people you're comparing yourself to have all agreed on what the metrics are. Yeah. And most of the time, you just pick the arbitrary ones that actually make you be on top, right? So it's like, well, what does that exactly mean? It's kind of like vanity numbers, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, so like in the entrepreneur world, solopreneurs, we talk about our socials, we talk about our Instagram followers, we talk about Facebook followers, we talk about podcast subscribers, YouTube subscribers, all these things. These are all wonderful goals and wonderful things to work for, but ultimately, they don't mean anything. They're completely arbitrary because you could have, and you see this a lot where there's somebody who only has a couple hundred Instagram followers and yet they're making tons of money off their Instagram. It's the quality of the followers, not the quantity. So it's kind of similar in that regard. That like, yeah, you could have millions of followers, but if they aren't paying attention, then who cares? Right? It's totally arbitrary. And in most platforms, it doesn't really matter. It's not necessarily hurting you to have these followers that aren't really paying attention. Although in some cases, it can actually hurt the algorithm. But like in your email marketing, if you've got email subscribers that are not paying attention, they're just costing you money. So they're really not important. It's much better to have a lower number, right? So it really comes down to like, what are your metrics? What, like, do you recognize what actually matters? So that's like, that would be a comparison of like a finite mindset would be all about, I have this many email subscribers, right?
Yep.
Whereas an infinite mindset would be saying, okay, maybe I only have 100, but like 50 of them I communicate with on a regular basis. They respond to me. They buy from me. That's way more valuable. Yes,
absolutely.
So much more valuable. So it's really shifting that focus of like what you're paying attention to and what you're looking towards, and recognizing that that concept of winning or achieving that arbitrary success is a waste of energy, basically.
Like that. I agree. It's something that we've always talked about. It's something about we've always, I don't want to say preach, but something we've always said is that engagement is definitely more valuable than the numbers. So I love that this is going in deeper and into a different mindset of, they don't call them, oh my gosh, I lost the word, vanity metrics.
Oh yes. They don't, right? But they should.
They don't in the book, but that is exactly what it is.
Yeah. Well, and this book, it's not super old. I want to say it's like 2018 or something like that. But because he's thinking on the corporate side, he really doesn't talk about socials in any way, shape, or form.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Me too. But you're right. It completely applies to that. Let me see. Oh, it's 2019. My bad. 2019.
It's the newest book we've talked about yet.
I know, until I was gonna say until my next one, but no, I just changed what my next one is. So rewind. So no, but this book was like it grabbed me from the beginning because in his introduction, I already highlighted and wrote. Okay. The introduction. The intro. And this was like kind of eye-opening for me because like in the introduction, he's explaining like why he wrote this book and how it's kind of sad that he had to write this book in the first place because he feels like this should be common sense. This is how people should think. People over profit should always be how things are.
Yes.
But as I was reading and as he was explaining all of this stuff, like I was recognizing for myself interactions I have had with consultants that I've hired and like recognizing, oh, these people are total like finite mindset people. That's why I didn't like working with them because they were so focused on the wrong things. They were not focused on relationship with me. And as somebody who, works in a similar capacity, right, in that kind of one-on-one capacity, it was a real wake-up call for me that I need to make sure that I never come off that way. That I never feel transactional with a client. Now, if there's somebody who, is just like taking an online course and we're not actually interacting, that's different. But I'm talking like face-to-face or one-on-one conversation, consultation, whatever. They should never feel like a number, like a transaction.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just I have so many tabs that I just have to like find the ones that I am gonna bring up. Okay. He also talks about how this comes into play when it comes to comparison, which we've talked about multiple times, because comparison is the thief of joy. It is like what kills 90% of solopreneurs, because their business is not the people, but like it's the worst thing, because we get so caught up in, what somebody else has or is succeeding in that we're not. And I think, we've talked about this, like when we were talking about Blue Ocean strategy and all that kind of stuff, like how important it is. Yes, you need to be aware of your competitors, but there's awareness and then there's comparison, right?
Absolutely. I think comparison is also the thief of success. I mean, and I can speak
100%.
from my own personal experience. When I started my photography business, I was constantly comparing myself to other photographers who I looked up to, photographers who inspired me. And I was always felt not good enough. But the second I stopped following them, and I'm not talking on social media, this is back in the day, pre 2007 Facebook. But the minute I stopped paying attention to what they were doing, I was able to really focus on what I needed to do, throw myself into my business, into my art, and into my success. And I blew up from there. And then the next thing you know, I'm at the dinner table with all of the bigwigs, and they're like, wow. Right. So it's one of those things where comparing yourself to others is 100% going to suck out your happiness. It's going to suck out your motivation. And it's definitely not going to help you succeed in anything if you're going to keep it in that mindset.
Yeah. And there's a quote I'm going to read from here that I know you're going to love. I highlighted and then I circled a particular word because it was, to me, like the most pivotal moment in the quote. He says, an infinite perspective frees us from fixating on what other companies are doing, which allows us to focus on a larger vision. It's all about that fixation.
What you circled.
Yeah. Yes. Because that's what it becomes, is that obsession. It's not about like, oh, I'm aware of, and I wish I had what they had, whatever. That's dangerous too, but it's that obsession and fixation on it that is so deadly.
Absolutely. And in not fixating and not having that obsession and just being aware of just having that knowledge, that is freeing. And that is exactly what he's saying in that quote. I love that. That is going on the Instagram. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, totally. But there are so many of them from this book, so just, pace yourself. But the example he's giving in this moment is between Apple and Microsoft back in the days when MP3, back in the days when MP3 players were coming out.
Okay.
Becoming such a thing, right? There's a whole story. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but there's so many great examples in this book of companies that do this well and companies that don't do this well. And by the way, I'm going to say this now because I'll forget to say it later, but the corporate company that I work for, which I won't be mentioning here, was mentioned in this book as doing it right. And I was very happy to see that. And I can attest that I agree they still do. I mean,
nice.
Yeah, there are moments where it's, everybody gets caught up in numbers sometimes, but ultimately I agree that they have stayed very infinite in that regard. But another little kind of tidbit in this same concept was talking about how Apple, of course, was the example of being infinite in this scenario, Microsoft being finite. But they're saying, they're saying Apple wasn't trying to outdo Microsoft. Apple was trying to outdo itself.
See,
and that's the key, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's totally the key, because you can spend all your time trying to outdo other people or other, other businesses that are like yours. But ultimately, that starts to lead you down a path you might not even want to go. And I don't just mean because it's dangerous, but because what that person is doing might not actually be the business that you want to end up with. We've talked about that before. And, if you're constantly just trying to outdo yourself, then you are still in control of the direction that you're going instead of letting somebody else lead you, right?
Yep. And that's there's that quote out there somewhere that the only person you ever need to impress is yourself.
Yeah.
Or the only person whose opinions matter is your own. Things like that. And it comes down to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that.
There's so many things I'm having a hard time. Okay. So I do want to kind of touch on the 5 points that are ultimately the chapters in this book.
Okay.
The chapters are, I'm going to be honest, they're quite large, but that's because there's there's just so much to say in each chapter. So the high points, or the what he calls the 5 essential practices that a leader or an entrepreneur needs to adopt in order to have that infinite mindset, are they need to advance a just cause. They need to build trusting teams, which I realize sounds more corporate or more less solopreneur, but track with me in a minute. I'll put a pin in that because I'm going to come back to that for solopreneurs. Study your worthy rivals. Prepare for existential flexibility and demonstrate the courage to lead. Okay.
Ooh, that's a good one. And
that is such a good one. And that's where he talked about the company that I work for that will not be named. That they demonstrated that well. But the going back to the trusting teams. So while as a solopreneur, you might say to yourself, like I initially did, well, I don't have a team, so how can I build a trusting team? That's where solopreneur community is so important.
I was going to say, you need to surround yourself, whether they're working for you or just supporting you. You need to be surrounded by that. Absolutely.
Yeah, because the point of it basically is that that trust needs to be there in order for honesty and integrity and all of that to be there. Now, if you're working as an actual team, it's obvious why that's important. But if you're in a solopreneur situation, if you don't have that level of trust with your community or your quote team, then how do you know that the feedback that you're asking for them to provide to you is honest, is full of integrity, is, you know what I'm saying, is actually working towards your benefit, is actually trying to help you. You have to build that level of trust. So I think that's why I think even though there are aspects of this that you have to do a little bit of translation for the entrepreneur world, I think it still totally works. So what I want to dive into, and I can already tell, I could seriously talk about this forever in a day. So I'm just going to say right now, I'm going to focus on one aspect for the rest of this episode. But then I think that we need to do a second episode for our successfuls over in the Patreon community, because there's so much more that I want to say. And I don't want to make this a 3-hour long episode, which I totally could.
I am down for that.
Okay. So I'm going to focus on just this one aspect right now. And then we'll do that for the next episode. So I want to dial in on this just cause concept.
Goody. Because that's what I was hoping you were going to pick, because I love that idea. I love the concept, but I want you to go deeper into that. So do.
Yeah. So, okay, there are, I'm trying to see if I can find, I don't think I actually highlighted where he defined the just cause, because that would have been smart to do that. So hang on a second. Story. So the way he's defining a just cause, and like I said, it's similar to a mission or a mission statement.
Right.
He says a just cause is a specific vision of a future state that does not yet exist. A future state so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices in order to help advance towards that vision. Okay. So I think it would be somewhat obvious that as a solopreneur, or as the inventor of a business, a creator of a business that you would be willing to sacrifice to further your vision. The point of this just cause and mission statement and all of that is that other people would also be willing to sacrifice for that. So whether you end up having employees someday, or this is just about, I mean, as simple as like referrals, people who are willing to refer to you because they believe so deeply in your just cause that they want to tell people about you, right? To help further advance it. So this is why I think it matters so much here. And this is not the same thing as a why. Okay.
Oh, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, wait a minute.
No.
So he has the book, Know Your Why, or Your Why, or something along the lines of your why, but it sounds like the opposite, because your why comes from your experiences. You're doing this because, not you're doing it for. It sounds like they coincide together very well, and that the just cause isn't a replacement for a why, but it's a building on it.
Yeah, there's like a couple of paragraphs as to what the comparison between the two, but just to kind of explain in his words, he says a just cause is not same as our why. Okay, a why comes from the past. It's an origin story. An origin story. It's a statement of who we are. Okay, so like the sum total of our values and beliefs.
Yes.
A just cause is about the future, defines where we're going, describes the world we hope to live in, and will commit to help build.
Oh, I love that.
So you can really only have like one why. There's only one reason that you're doing what you're doing, but you can be working towards multiple just causes, right? Your why is fixed. It's not going to change. Whereas in contrast, your just cause is something that is going to be constantly changing.
It's very fluid. I love the world we hope to live in. And that in itself is something that's going to change your just cause, because hopefully you accomplish that and you get to the world you want to live in, but the world is still going to need changing. It's always going to need improvement. There's always going to be room for growth. Therefore, your just cause is going to constantly be growing with you. I really like that.
Yeah. So he's got 5 kind of bullet points of what a just cause must be. And this is where, I mean, I had already been writing a little bit in the book, but this is where I really started, because this is where my brainstorming of like, okay, so how do I write a just cause for Tech Savvy Academy? And, you know, which I sent to you, by the way, because I was so like, ooh, this is what I'm coming up with. So your just cause must be for something, meaning affirmative and optimistic. So it's not, you can't have a negative just cause. It must be inclusive, so open to all who would like to contribute. Service-oriented for the primary benefit of others. This one is super important. Resilient, able to endure political, technological, and cultural change. This one's huge for me because technological change is nonstop. And what I'm doing is technology-based, right? So I have to have a just cause that is not, I hate to say it, based on Trello, because Trello may not be around in 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it will. Don't get me wrong. It's not going anywhere. But like,
it might not grow. Trello might not have the same idea, the same thought process of growing. They might think, we're good. We're not changing anything. So, you know, a few years down the road, there might be somebody who built on it and thought, you know, I can do better.
Exactly. So that one to me was super important. And then the last one, and this is what really makes it infinite, is idealistic, big, bold, and ultimately unachievable. Okay.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. So this is the part where, like, for me, like, I think a lot of it was kind of things I'd already thought of. You know, I was able to plug in some of my existing I help statement type things into a lot of these. But when it came to idealistic, I was like, oh, I don't really have anything like that, which meant like, oh, I guess I've been sort of finite minded without even realizing.
Yeah.
So for me, what that came down to was realizing, okay, well, what is it? What is the ultimate goal? Like, yes, I personally, I want to help, especially, you know, female solopreneurs, but really all entrepreneurs, but to help them use, you know, simple and affordable automation to make their business more efficient. Okay, that's a thing, that's a tangible thing, and that is achievable, right? So it's not infinite. But when it comes to that idealistic, ultimately unachievable, that's when I really had to think. And I was like, you know what it comes down to is the ability to be self-reliant. Because I think there are more than maybe people realize, people like myself, and I think maybe you, who are solopreneurs by choice, who don't want to build an empire, who don't want to have a bunch of employees. Like maybe a little help here and there would be nice, but like we want to be self-reliant. We don't want other people to be necessary in order for our business to run.
I love that you bring that up, because the next book I'm talking about is called The Company of One, and it focuses on that specifically, why staying small is not a bad thing. You don't have to have 32 employees to consider yourself successful.
Right.
You can be a successful person and have a great life and a great job and all of those things, still being a solopreneur and being self-reliant does not necessarily mean you don't have a team, but it does mean that you're fully capable. I love that.
Yes. Yes. And so that's what like became for me the idealistic aspect of the Just Cause for the Tech Savvy Academy. Right. So saying that just to like help people understand like how an existing I help or a mission, because a lot of us have a mission of some kind or, an I help statement or whatever. But if you look at it, it's probably kind of finite. Mm-hmm. And that's normal, right? Because we're thinking and we're told all the time that we need to explain what's the transformation I'm giving someone, which implies winning. Yeah. It implies achievement. And that's, there needs to be some achievement along the way. Don't get me wrong. Like if you can't constantly tell your clients, well, you're never going to actually finish with me. Like, no, that's not
it
the
implies
point.
an end to the game, right?
Right. It implies an end to the game. That's exactly right. So like for me, like making someone self-reliant also has to mean that they don't need to rely on me either. Right. Yeah. And that I think is a really hard piece for a lot of coaches, because it kind of comes back to the scarcity mindset a little bit of, well, I want these people to, want to always be in one of my programs or always be in my mastermind or always whatever. But if that's really our goal, then we don't actually want success for our clients, because success for our clients means they graduate from us. They don't need us anymore. And really quick, before we're finishing up with this episode, I do want to kind of bring in that concept of the being inclusive, open to all who would like to contribute, because again, that feels a little bit like something that's a little more corporate, right? Because it's something that like, you want your employees to want to work towards that just cause and help achieve it, even though it's unachievable, rather than just coming to work, right?
Yeah.
Again, as a solopreneur, that is not the situation, but your community is included in that. So it's kind of like when we're talking about building trusting teams, it's the same thing. It's your Just Cause is inclusive in that other people would want to refer people over to you in your program or whatever it might be, because they believe in your Just Cause and they want to help further it, but they know it's not in their personal skill set to do it. So therefore they kind of pass someone along to you, right?
And they're contributing.
Exactly. They're contributing in that way. And so this is, another thought of why you might want to someday create an affiliate program for your business or a referral program of some kind, so that people are rewarded when they do that. But ultimately, they shouldn't even need that. They should just be throwing people at you because they believe in what you're doing so much, right? So, like I said, I could go on and on and on and on about this book. I'm not even like that. Literally, I'm on page 37. And it's like a 220 page book. But there were so many things and it's so meaty. So, if you want to read the book, the links are in the show notes. But if you want to continue the conversation, I highly recommend that you come join us over in the community on Patreon, because we're going to keep talking about this book because it's awesome. If you guys want to connect with us on social media, Jolene, do you want to tell them how they can do that?
Sure. You can follow us on Instagram at Success Through Community, or join our free or paid communities over at Patreon, which is patreon.com/STC Productions.
The best way that you can support the podcast is to make sure that you are subscribed wherever you're listening and leave us a review. That's the only way that new people will find and join our community. The Success Through Community podcast is hosted by Kelly Gable and Jolene Mills, and all episodes are solely the opinions of the respective host. Our sound production and editing is done by Kelly Gable, and all visual creative, including our logo, was created by Jolene Mills. The Success Through Community podcast is an STC production.